test de la CMTA a permis de montrer quelque chose d'extrêmement important, qui est qu'il est possible d'exécuter des transactions, une fois que ces dernières ont été réalisées sur une plateforme de négociation, qu'il est possible d'exécuter ces transactions directement sur la blockchain, sans créer de risque de contrepartie, en monnaie fiat.
Der Handel von Wertpapieren benötigt immer zwei Legs oder zwei Teile. Das eine ist das Wertpapier und das andere ist die Cash-Seite. Sehr viel Effort wird gemacht, um auf der Wertpapierseite Piloten zu machen. Dieser Pilot hier ist interessant, weil er beide Themen miteinander kombiniert. Und zwar nicht der Versuch, dass man jetzt Cash tokenisiert und auch auf die bestehende Blockchain bringt, sondern dass man wie eine Triggerlösung hat und bestehende Infrastruktur für Geld verwendet und damit eine Verbindung zwischen der traditionellen Welt und der Blockchain-Welt herstellen kann.
Ein zentrales Merkmal des laufenden Proof of Concept ist das Settlement von tokenisierten Wertpapieren direkt in Fiat-Währung.
Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper on the creation of a peer-to-peer electronic cash called Bitcoin was published in 2008. Ever since, the financial industry has been looking for ways to use distributed ledger technology in the capital markets. This effort was particularly sustained in Switzerland. In 2018, Switzerland's financial regulator, FINMA, was among the first to provide guidelines on the treatment of digital assets in financial markets. In 2020, the Swiss Parliament also stepped in. It approved an overhaul of the country's financial laws to better regulate digital assets.
La TRD est particulièrement intéressante dans le domaine spécifique du marché des capitaux parce que si on y réfléchit bien, tout dans les marchés des capitaux tourne autour de la tenue de registre. Or, la TRD est précisément une technologie qui permet de tenir des registres de façon particulièrement fiable et flexible.
Much attention has been directed toward cryptocurrencies. But for most of the finance industry, the main focus is elsewhere.
Also bei Tokenisierung geht es generell Effizienz.
The main benefits are for us in just running a smoother, more streamlined operation, being able to issue tokenized investment products more easily with just almost infinite flexibility. This is very interesting for us.
Langfristig wird es darauf hinauslaufen, dass wir eine Automatisierung hinkriegen, insbesondere auf dem Lifecycle, sprich Events, die auf dem Produkt stattfinden, können wir bedeutend einfacher abbilden und automatisiert den Finanzakteuren zur Verfügung stellen. Und dies vereinfacht eigentlich bei allen Backoffices von diesen Banken die Prozesse am Ende des Tages.
La digitalisation des actions n'est rien d'autre que le recyclage ou la modernisation d'un très vieux mécanisme, très ancien, qui consiste à incorporer des valeurs dans un support. La différence, c'est que jusqu'à présent, on parlait de support physique, un certificat papier, et que maintenant, on parle de jetons digitaux inscrits dans une blockchain.
In 2018, the Capital Markets and Technology Association was created in Geneva. It was founded by Lenz & Stehlen, the law firm, Swissquote, the online bank, and Temenos, the producer of banking software solutions, with the support of the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne. The association's purpose is to develop standards for using the distributed ledger in traditional financial markets. Today, it regroups more than 40 of the Swiss financial industry's key players, including banks, fintechs, exchanges, law firms, and trade bodies. The CMTA has adopted standards on subjects such as the digitalization of securities, the custody of digital assets, and their treatment under the Swiss anti-money laundering rules.
La CMTA développe des standards pour l'utilisation d'une technologie qu'on appelle la technologie des registres distribués, ou Distributed Ledger Technology en anglais, dans les marchés financiers.
Es ist illusorisch zu glauben, dass eine einzelne Bank einen Standard definieren kann. Von daher sind wir sehr dankbar, dass es eine Organisation wie die CMTA gibt, die genau solche Standards definiert und versucht, entsprechend zu etablieren.
Le projet de la CMTA, c'est d'avoir le meilleur des deux mondes. C'est d'avoir la fluidité, la facilité d'accès au marché des capitaux du monde des actifs digitaux, tout en ayant la prévisibilité et la sécurité juridique de la finance classique.
In December 2022, after more than a year of work, a group of CMTA's members carried out a proof of concept for the issuance, trading and settlement of investment products. The project involved 3 banks, Credit Suisse, Pictet and Vontobel, issuing investment products in the form of ledger-based securities and trading them through BX Swiss, a Swiss-regulated trading venue.
As a stock exchange, BX Swiss is playing a central role in this proof of concept, and we have been leading the trading and post-trading working group with the banks. Together with major Swiss banks, we wanted to deliver on the true promise of blockchain or distributed ledger technology, namely reduction of financial intermediaries and lower costs. We have demonstrated that we can settle a trade in a digital asset without the need for a central bank digital currency or CDBC or a trusted stablecoin. You have to understand that this is a significant step towards the broad adoption of blockchain technology in the traditional financial system.
One of the main originalities of the test was that the trades executed on exchange were settled bilaterally through the Ethereum blockchain in Swiss francs without using cryptocurrency.
Bei Transaktionen auf der Public Blockchain kommt die Effizienz der Tokenisierung voll zum Tragen.
In the case of our POC, we really wanted to emphasize 2 main points. The first one being that we traded in a fiat currency, so not relying on cryptocurrencies or a stablecoin. And the second is that we were trading it through a regulated exchange like BX Swiss.
We are among the first traditional stock exchanges to experiment an admission of a tokenized security on a public blockchain. And I stress the word public blockchain. Truly, the centralized public blockchains offer a very high level of reliability, trust, and transparency. Take Ethereum, for example. There are thousands of very skilled people across the globe who constantly validate transactions and who constantly further develop the underlying technology. The only downside we see with using public chains are the relatively high transaction costs.
La blockchain Ethereum est en train de travailler à des projets de ce qu'on appelle scalability, pour monter en échelle. Et dans quelques années, dans peut-être 1 ou 2 ans, on aura un réseau beaucoup plus rapide qui permettra des transactions à plus haute fréquence et aussi à moindre coût.
The significance of the proof of concept can be better understood by considering how securities are managed in traditional financial markets. Today, securities are held via custodians, mostly banks. Those banks, in turn, deposit the securities that they hold with central depositories called CSDs. In Switzerland, the main CSD is SIX SIS, a company based in Olten. When an investor wishes to buy or sell a security, it generally gives a trading instruction to its bank. The buy and sell orders are communicated to a securities exchange, where they are matched to generate trades. Once agreed, the trades must be settled. This involves transferring the purchase price owed by the purchaser to the seller and the securities promised by the seller to the purchaser. To achieve this, financial markets traditionally rely on centralized systems. The banks are part of a clearing system, usually operated by the national bank, which carries out the cash transfers. The system debits the cash account of the purchasing bank at the central bank and credits the cash account of the selling bank. The banks, in turn, debit and credit the cash accounts of their respective end clients. The same happens on the paper side of the trades. The CSD debits the securities account of the selling bank and credits the securities account of the purchasing bank. The relevant banks, again, debit and credit the accounts of their respective end clients. The situation is different in a blockchain-based market environment. Instead of a debit and credit of the participating bank's account at the CSD, the transfers are recorded directly on the blockchain, where they are validated by a community of participants by means of a consensus protocol.
The operational setup that has been tested does neither involve a central counterparty, CCP, nor does it involve a central securities depository, CSD. And why? Because we don't need them to trade digital assets efficiently. Central counterparties are mostly meant to manage the default risk of the participants during the settlement cycle. And the settlement cycle in the traditional regime is relatively long. In Switzerland, it's T+2, meaning today plus two days for the settlement. And with using on-chain solutions, you can greatly reduce this settlement cycle. So we don't need a CCP. And we also don't need a CSD because we are recording all the trades and digital assets on a public ledger. So at the end, we can achieve significant cost reductions along the whole value chain of issuance, clearing, settlement and the safekeeping of digital assets.
Dans le cadre de ce test, BX agit à deux titres. D'abord comme plateforme de négociation traditionnelle, en faisant ce que l'on appelle le matching, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a un ordre vendeur, un ordre acheteur et la bourse les identifie, les lie ensemble et il en résulte une transaction. Mais BX a rempli aussi un rôle qui est un rôle post-trade, c'est-à-dire qu'une fois le matching effectué, BX a organisé l'exécution de la transaction. Pour organiser l'exécution de la transaction, il est nécessaire de disposer d'une licence qui n'est pas simplement une licence de bourse, mais qui englobe aussi l'aspect post-trade.
The securities are associated with digital tokens recorded on the blockchain to become what Swiss law calls ledger-based securities. Under Swiss law, the ownership of these securities follows the digital tokens. For the purpose of the proof of concept, the banks issued 3 investment products. Vontobel and Pictet each issued an actively managed equity certificate representing a basket of equities. Credit Suisse issued a structured note. These securities were associated with digital tokens, which were recorded on Ethereum's Sepolia testnet.
Du point de vue juridique, la seule chose vraiment importante que nous ayons fait pour le processus de tokenisation, c'est d'ajouter un certain nombre de clauses, quelques-unes pas plus en réalité, au terme des produits d'investissement qui ont été tokenisés. Le but de ces clauses contractuelles, c'est de régir le rapport entre le produit et le token. C'est-à-dire de pouvoir faire en sorte que pour chaque token qui a été émis, on l'associe avec un produit existant. Et ça, c'est une opération qui est en réalité très similaire, voire même identique, à ce que la CMTA connaissait déjà bien, que l'on avait expérimenté avec la tokenisation d'actions.
The tokens were created using a modified version of the CMTAT, an open source smart contract published by the Capital Markets and Technology Association.
We have decided to use open source smart contracts for both the tokenization of the digital asset and the settlement. What we need are reliable and trusted standards and not proprietary solutions. The higher the degree of standardization, the lower the costs. The use of standard smart contracts greatly reduces the integration efforts for the participating banks and security firms. And that's why we have agreed with CMTA and the banks to establish the required smart contracts as open source right from the start.
Les smart contracts sont des éléments de code, ce sont des softwares, mais ce sont des codes relativement peu compliqués et qui, pour l'industrie, sont des choses dont on a besoin, mais qui ne vont pas être des facteurs différenciants pour les prestataires de services. Ce n'est pas avec le smart contract que quelqu'un va pouvoir mettre en avant ses prestations. Et la conséquence de ça, c'est que le smart contract est aussi pas un centre de profit. Personne ne va gagner d'argent avec un smart contract. Par contre, c'est important que tout le monde ait le même et, si possible, que le smart contract fonctionne. Donc il y a, de ce point de vue, un grand intérêt à pouvoir disposer de logiciels, de code qui soient standards, qui reflètent un consensus de l'industrie et qui fonctionnent de façon satisfaisante. Et compte tenu de cette nécessité, une association, donc une organisation sans but lucratif, est en réalité une plateforme assez naturelle pour créer ce genre de choses. L'association elle-même ne vend rien. L'association offre un objet d'infrastructure et du coup, la structure du code open source est aussi une structure qui est relativement naturelle.
Das Ziel am Ende des Tages muss für den Finanzplatz sein, dass wir eine standardisierte Lösung anbieten, damit alle Akteure, sprich alle Emittenten, denselben Standard verwenden können. Am Ende des Tages differenzieren wir uns nicht über den Standard des Smart Contracts, sondern über das Produkt selbst.
Qu'on voit dans le développement logiciel, donc aujourd'hui une grande partie du logiciel est open source. Un des avantages, donc d'une part c'est la transparence, on sait que quand on l'utilise, donc le code est vraiment public, tout le monde peut le voir. Donc c'est une forme de garantie, une forme d'assurance contre des fonctionnalités malicieuses, des bugs qui pourraient être inclus dans ce code.
The process for creating ledger-based securities has been known for some time, so the focus of the proof of concept was not the issuance of security tokens. Rather, the focus was on how trades in ledger-based securities can be settled. In other words, how the tokens can be transferred from the seller to the purchaser, while the purchase price is transferred from the purchaser to the seller. There are several ways to achieve this result. The most commonly used consists in pre-funding the relevant trades. Pre-funding involves transferring both the security tokens and the cash to the exchange prior to each trade. Once a buy and a sell order are matched on the exchange and a trade is entered into, the exchange debits the cash account of the purchaser and credits the cash account of the seller. It does the reverse with the securities accounts of each party. The downside of this is that both the cash and the securities must be transferred to the exchange in advance. One alternative is to transfer the securities and the cash only after the trade has been entered into. This is more complicated though, because the transfers of the securities and the cash must be synchronized. It is important to avoid a situation in which the seller transfers the tokens to the purchaser but does not receive the purchase price in return, or a situation in which the purchaser pays the purchase price but does not receive the tokens in return. In traditional capital markets, synchronized transfers are achieved through a delivery versus payment, or DVP, settlement. DVP is a process in which a security is only transferred upon simultaneous transfer of the purchase price. If markets for digital assets are to develop, the DVP function needs to be created on the blockchain. This was a key objective of CMTA's proof of concept.
Bei Lieferung gegen Bezahlung handelt es sich um ein grundsätzliches Problem, da nämlich eine der beiden Parteien in Vorleistung gehen muss. Normalerweise wird das so gelöst, dass man einen Dritten dazu beauftragt, dies simultan vorzunehmen. Im jetzigen Proof of Concept verwenden wir Smart Contracts als Innovation und das erlaubt uns, die Abwicklung zentral, gesteuert, automatisiert auf einem öffentlichen Blockchain-Netzwerk vorzunehmen.
Donc, pour simplifier, ce que le DVP va faire en termes technologiques, c'est s'assurer que deux actifs vont être échangés sans qu'un puisse être envoyé alors que l'autre ne l'est pas. C'est ce qu'on appelle parfois dans le monde blockchain le atomic swap.
Replicating a DVP function on the blockchain is reasonably easy to do if the ledger-based securities are traded against a cryptocurrency. In that case, a smart contract can be used to swap the security token against the payment token. the transfer of the two tokens is simultaneous. None of the parties incurs a credit risk. The situation becomes more complex when trades are to be settled in Swiss francs. There is currently no official Ethereum version of the Swiss franc. A payment in Swiss francs involves either transferring physical coins and notes or a transfer from one bank account to another. When more than one bank is involved, an interbank clearing system is needed. In Switzerland, this system is called the Swiss Interbank Clearing, or SIC. It is operated by SIX by mandate of the Swiss National Bank. Coordinating a cash transfer through the SIC system and a token transfer on the blockchain requires specific functionalities. In CMTA's proof of concept, this was achieved via an application called DLT2Pay from the German company Targens and the use of a DVP smart contract. The DVP smart contract was created by CMTA and makes it possible to swap tokens on the Ethereum blockchain. CMTA benefited from the technical expertise of Taurus, a Geneva-based fintech, and the assistance of Targens in this aspect.
Bei DLT2Pay, einem Produkt der Targens, handelt es sich eine Payment-Brücke, die einerseits ein beliebiges DLT- oder Blockchain-Netzwerk mit einem beliebigen Zahlungsverkehrsprotokoll verbindet.
Alors Taurus, en tant que fintech, que société technologique, et en tant qu'expert également en sécurité, Taurus a pu contribuer au développement des smart contracts, à leur sécurisation et également à leur déploiement. Donc, le déploiement, c'est quand on passe du smart contract dans l'environnement de test au smart contract vraiment déployé sur la vraie blockchain. À Taurus, on a des ingénieurs spécialisés en technologie blockchain, notamment experts en smart contract et en sécurité, et on a mis ces compétences à disposition pour le test.
With DLT2Pay, the purchasing bank mints a payment order token on the blockchain, which contains a unique digitally represented payment instruction to the SIC system. Once a trade has been executed, the exchange communicates the details of the trade to each bank. Using DLT2Pay, the purchasing bank will issue, or mint, a payment order token. The payment order token is minted or transferred on a ledger address controlled by the exchange, where it is held until completion of the settlement process. The selling bank allows the transfer of security tokens representing the investment products to a ledger address controlled by the exchange. Upon receipt of the payment order token, the DVP smart contract verifies that the selling bank has allowed sufficient security tokens to be transferred to the ledger address controlled by the exchange. If the allowance is insufficient, the trade is not settled and the payment order token is deactivated. But if the allowance is sufficient, the security tokens are automatically transferred to a ledger address controlled by the exchange, where they are held in escrow until completion of the settlement process. Once both the payment order token and the security tokens have been transferred to a ledger address controlled by the exchange, the payment order token is activated, and its status on the blockchain is changed to payment initiated. The DLT2Pay solution then conveys the payment instruction to the SIC system, and the payment is processed as a regular SIC payment. Once the SIC system acknowledges the payment, the DLT2Pay solution triggers a new change to the payment order token's status on the blockchain as payment confirmed. Upon such event, the DVP smart contract releases the security token from escrow and transfers it to the purchaser's ledger address. If for any reason the payment cannot be completed on the SIC system within 48 hours, the payment order token is deactivated and the security token is returned to a ledger address controlled by the seller. What does the proof of concept demonstrate? Many of the implications of this new way to issue and trade securities remain to be fully grasped. But the proof of concept demonstrates that it is possible to issue securities in the form of digital tokens, to admit ledger-based securities to trading on a regulated exchange, and to settle trades carried out on exchange in fiat currency on a peer-to-peer basis without any of the parties incurring a credit risk. The potential ramifications are deep and manifold. The proof of concept shows that the potential of digital assets extends far beyond cryptocurrencies and has far-reaching implications for the financial industry in Switzerland and abroad.
I think this has the potential to be more than just a POC, because we prove that you can have settlement with the traditional currency like the Swiss franc, which was not a given, and seeing all the problems that have taken place with stablecoins elsewhere, I think this is something that can actually carry trust, and this is going to help us combine again the benefits of blockchain with the benefits of the traditional payment system.
Primär haben wir mit dem Proof of Concept mehr das Settlement beleuchtet. Und ich glaube, für die Zukunft wird es dann vor allem wichtig sein, den Standard des Smart Contracts so zu definieren, dass das Produkt und seine Charakteristik sauber abgebildet ist auf der Blockchain.
As a stock exchange, we have always aimed to facilitate the listing and the trading of financial instruments in a very regulated, trusted and safe environment. To achieve this, we are not dependent on the form of the financial instrument. So it doesn't make a difference for us whether the issuer is choosing a traditional security or a digital asset. In the long run, we think there will be a shift from the traditional securities to digital assets, and this will happen over time. For us, we don't really care so much how long this process will take, as we can play on both fields.
Et un autre développement qui est sous-entendu par le test de la CMTA, et en fait c'est quelque chose des perspectives qui est ouverte par ce genre de test, est toute la perspective de rationaliser et de fluidifier le processus, la chaîne de valeur, la création de valeur mobilière, tout le processus qui va de la conception, de l'émission, de l'admission au négoce et ensuite de l'exécution. Ce sont des processus qui en ce moment sont en grande partie manuels, qui impliquent un grand nombre d'intermédiaires et qui sont par conséquent très coûteux. Et la perspective de la digitalisation est de pouvoir simplifier ces processus et les fluidifier de façon très importante, de façon à ce qui prend aujourd'hui des jours puisse à l'avenir être réalisé potentiellement en quelques heures, voire en quelques minutes, voire en quelques secondes.